Hi, I'm Lieutenant Sarah McKenzie. When I invited my father to walk me down the aisle, he refused, saying he wouldn't support my disgraceful decision to marry beneath my social status. He thought humiliating me would force me to call off the wedding and return to the life he'd planned for me. What he didn't know was that my Navy SEAL brothers had been watching his treatment of me for years, and his rejection was about to trigger the most spectacular honor guard formation in military history.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
The invitation I'd sent him wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd become, and everything I'd chosen for my future. After 8 years in the Navy, rising through the ranks to become one of the youngest female lieutenants in Naval Special Warfare Command, I was finally ready to marry the love of my life at the Naval Base Coronado Chapel. My fiancé, Petty Officer First Class Jake Rodriguez, was a Navy SEAL medic who'd saved countless lives during 3 combat deployments. We'd met during a joint training exercise where I was serving as the mission intelligence officer, and he was part of the special operations team I was briefing. Jake was everything my father wasn't: humble, honorable, and completely devoted to serving something greater than himself. The wedding was planned for Memorial Day weekend at the chapel overlooking San Diego Bay with a reception at the historic Hotel del Coronado. I'd dreamed of this moment since joining the Navy, a military ceremony that honored both our service and our love, surrounded by the brothers and sisters in arms who'd become my true family over the years. Growing up as the daughter of Senator William McKenzie had been a carefully orchestrated performance of privilege and expectation. Our family's Georgetown mansion was a showcase of political power, where senators, ambassadors, and Fortune 500 CEOs gathered for dinner parties that shaped national policy. My father had built his political career on a platform of traditional American values and military strength, despite never having served a day in uniform himself. From childhood, my path was predetermined. I was expected to attend Wellesley College, like my mother and grandmother before me, marry someone from our social circle, preferably a senator's son or heir to a political dynasty, and become the perfect political wife who could host fundraisers and influence policy from behind the scenes. "Sarah, darling," my mother would say during our weekly etiquette lessons, "remember that our family's reputation depends on the choices you make. Every decision reflects on your father's career and our family's standing in society." But I had different dreams. While my classmates at Georgetown Preparatory School planned their debutante balls and sorority rushes, I was studying military history and dreaming of serving my country in a real way, not just from the comfort of a Senate office or charity gala. The day I announced my decision to attend the Naval Academy instead of Wellesley, my father's reaction was swift and brutal. "No daughter of mine will waste her potential playing soldier," he'd said, his voice cold with disgust. "You'll attend Wellesley, major in political science, and prepare for the life you were born to live." But I'd already been accepted to Annapolis, and I was determined to forge my own path. The 4 years at the Naval Academy were the most challenging and rewarding of my life, learning leadership under pressure, earning the respect of my classmates regardless of my political connections, and discovering that I was capable of so much more than hosting dinner parties and looking elegant at campaign events. After graduation, I'd specialized in naval intelligence, eventually earning assignment to Naval Special Warfare Command, where I worked directly with SEAL teams planning and executing high-stakes missions. It was demanding, dangerous work that required split-second decisions and absolute trust from some of the military's most elite operators. Jake represented everything I'd found in my military family that I'd never experienced at home: unconditional support, respect earned through actions rather than birthright, and love based on who I was rather than what I could provide politically or socially. The invitation I'd sent to my father was my final attempt to bridge the gap between the life I'd chosen and the family I'd been born into. For the first 18 years of my life, I believed my father was everything a daughter could want. powerful, successful, and completely devoted to protecting our family's legacy. Senator William McKenzie was a towering figure in Washington politics, known for his passionate speeches about military strength and American values. At home, he was the man who taught me to ride horses at our Virginia estate, who took me to father-daughter dances at the country club, who promised that I could achieve anything I set my mind to. "You're special, Sarah," he'd tell me during our weekend rides through the rolling hills of our Middleburg estate. "You have the intelligence and breeding to change the world. The Mackenzie name opens doors that other people can only dream of walking through." My father had carefully cultivated my image as the perfect political daughter. I attended the best private schools, spoke fluent French and Spanish, played violin at Carnegie Hall as part of the youth orchestra, and volunteered at carefully selected charities that would look impressive on future campaign materials. Every achievement was celebrated, every accomplishment documented for potential political advantage. When I was accepted to the Naval Academy, my father's initial reaction had been pride mixed with strategic calculation. "A military background could be valuable for your political career," he'd said, already envisioning how my service could enhance his own reputation. "4 years at Annapolis, then law school, then we'll position you for a congressional seat by the time you're 35. But as my military career progressed and I excelled in ways he hadn't anticipated, my father's pride began to transform into something darker. He'd expected me to serve a respectable tour, gain some leadership experience, and then transition into the political career he'd planned. Instead, I was thriving in the military, earning respect based on my own merit rather than my family connections. "Sarah, it's time to think about your future," he'd said during one of our quarterly dinners at the Army-Navy Club in Washington. "You've proven your point about military service. Now it's time to come home and start building the career that will really matter." The tension escalated when I was assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command. My father couldn't understand why I'd want to work with enlisted men and special operations cowboys when I could be using my Annapolis education and political connections to secure a prestigious staff position at the Pentagon or Naval War College. "You're wasting your potential, Sarah," became his constant refrain during our increasingly strained phone conversations. "These SEAL teams aren't your people. You belong in strategic planning, policy development, positions where your education and background can make a real difference." But my SEAL teammates had become more than colleagues. They were the brothers I'd never had, men who judged me based on my competence and character rather than my father's political influence. They trusted me with their lives during mission planning, respected my intelligence assessments, and treated me as an equal in ways my father never had. When I started dating Jake, my father's disapproval became open hostility. During Jake's first visit to our Georgetown home, my father had been coldly polite but clearly dismissive. After Jake left, the gloves came off completely. "Sarah, this is embarrassing," my father had said, pouring himself a scotch with hands that trembled slightly with rage. "That boy is a high school graduate from East Los Angeles who enlisted because he had no other options. You're a Naval Academy graduate with a master's degree from Georgetown. This relationship is beneath you." "Jake is a decorated combat veteran who's saved dozens of lives," I'd replied, my own anger building. "He's earned 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. He's more honorable than most of the men you want me to date." "Honor doesn't pay for country club memberships or fund political campaigns," my father had snapped. "You're thinking like a naive girl instead of like a Mackenzie. This infatuation will pass, but the damage to your reputation could be permanent." The relationship I'd thought was built on love and pride had revealed itself to be conditional, dependent on my willingness to follow the script he'd written for my life rather than creating my own path.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The formal wedding invitation was elegant and understated, printed on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing that reflected the military tradition I was so proud to represent. I'd spent weeks perfecting the wording, ensuring it honored both the solemnity of our commitment and the significance of our military service. Lieutenant Sarah Elizabeth McKenzie and Petty Officer First Class Jacob Michael Rodriguez request the honor of your presence at their marriage ceremony. Saturday, the 28th of May, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Naval Base Coronado Chapel, San Diego, California. I'd hand-addressed my father's invitation in my best calligraphy, adding a personal note that I'd rewritten 3 times before settling on words that expressed both my love and my hope. Dad, this would mean the world to me if you could walk me down the aisle. I know you have concerns about my choices, but I hope you can see how happy Jake makes me and how much our service means to both of us. Your little girl is getting married, and I want you there. Love always, Sarah. The envelope was mailed to his Georgetown office on a Tuesday morning, sent with delivery confirmation so I'd know exactly when it arrived. I'd imagined him opening it during one of his morning briefings, perhaps softening when he saw my handwritten note, maybe even feeling proud that his daughter had found love with a genuine American hero. The response came 3 weeks later, not in the form of an RSVP card or a phone call, but through my mother, who called while I was reviewing intelligence reports for an upcoming training exercise. Sarah, darling. My mother's voice was strained with the particular kind of stress that came from delivering messages she didn't want to convey. Your father asked me to call about the wedding indication. Is he planning to come? I asked, hope and anxiety warring in my chest. Sweetheart, he's not comfortable attending the ceremony. He feels that supporting this marriage would be endorsing choices that go against everything our family represents. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not comfortable attending. After everything we'd been through, after all his speeches about family values and supporting our troops, he couldn't bring himself to walk his only daughter down the aisle because her fiancé didn't meet his social standards. He said that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He said that you're making a mistake that will define the rest of your life, and he won't be part of legitimizing it. He thinks that if he refuses to attend, you might reconsider and call off the wedding. The cruelty of his calculation took my breath away. My father wasn't just declining my invitation, he was weaponizing his absence, using my love for him as leverage to control my life choices. He believed that his rejection would be so devastating that I'd abandon the man I loved and the happiness I'd found to earn back his approval. Sarah, he also wanted me to tell you that if you go through with this wedding, you shouldn't expect any financial support for your future. No help with a house, no college fund for your children, no inheritance. He's prepared to cut ties completely if you marry beneath the family standards. The threat was clear and comprehensive. Marry Jake and lose everything. My father's love, my family's support, my inheritance, my place in the only world I'd known before the military. It was an ultimatum designed to force me to choose between my happiness and my family, between love and legacy. He's giving you time to think about it, my mother continued weakly. He hopes you'll come to your senses and realize that some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good of the family. That night, I sat in my quarters at Naval Base Coronado, staring at the wedding invitation that had been returned to me with "declined" written across it in my father's distinctive handwriting. Below that, he'd added a note that cut deeper than any physical wound. I won't watch my daughter disgrace herself and our family name. Some mistakes are too public to forgive. The man who had raised me, who had claimed to love me unconditionally, had chosen his social status over my happiness. He was willing to miss the most important day of my life to make a point about class and breeding that mattered more to him than his daughter's heart. Within 24 hours of my mother's devastating phone call, my father's political machine had swung into action to control the narrative surrounding his rejection of my wedding. The man who'd built his career on family values and military support couldn't afford to let the public know he'd refused to attend his own daughter's military wedding. The first sign of his damage control campaign came through my mother's best friend, Patricia Whitman, who called with what she claimed was friendly advice about handling family disagreements. "Sarah, dear, your mother is so worried about this misunderstanding between you and your father," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps it would be better for everyone if you postpone the wedding until family tensions cool down. These things have a way of working themselves out if you give them time." Misunderstanding.
as if my father's written rejection and financial threats were simply a miscommunication that could be resolved with patience and diplomacy. The second wave came through my father's chief of staff, who reached out under the pretense of coordinating my father's schedule for potential campaign events. Lieutenant McKenzie, the senator wanted me to clarify that his inability to attend your ceremony is purely due to prior commitments related to the Defense Appropriations Committee. He has the utmost respect for your service and wishes you well. Prior commitments. My father was rewriting history before it was even written, creating an official narrative that would protect his political reputation while destroying my heart. But the most painful manipulation came through my own mother, who began a campaign of emotional warfare designed to make me question my choices and blame myself for the family fracture. Sarah, you have to understand how difficult this is for your father, she said during one of our increasingly strained conversations. He spent his entire career advocating for military families, and now his own daughter is creating a situation that contradicts everything he's worked for. Creating a situation. My mother was positioning my marriage to a decorated Navy SEAL as a problem I'd created rather than a joy I wanted to share with my family. Maybe you could consider a longer engagement, she suggested with desperate hope. Give your father time to get to know Jake better. Let him see that this relationship is more than a rebellious phase. The pressure intensified when my father's political allies began reaching out with thinly veiled attempts to discredit Jake and make me question his motives for marrying a senator's daughter. "Sarah, darling," said Margaret Hamilton, wife of a Supreme Court justice and longtime family friend, "you must be careful about men who might be attracted to your family's prominence rather than to you personally. Military men can be very strategic about advancement opportunities." The implication was clear and devastating. Jake was using me for political access, and I was too naive to recognize it. They were poisoning my confidence in the relationship while positioning themselves as concerned family friends trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. My father even enlisted my Naval Academy classmates who'd remained in traditional career paths, having them reach out with carefully scripted messages about the importance of thinking strategically about marriage and career advancement. "Sarah, we all respect your service, but you have to consider how this marriage might impact your future promotion potential. Military wives from certain backgrounds face different challenges than those from families with political connections." The message was sophisticated and cruel. They were suggesting marrying Jake would damage my military career while positioning my father's rejection as protective rather than punitive. But perhaps the most painful part of their campaign was how they turned my love for Jake into evidence of my poor judgment. Every quality I admired in him, his humility, his dedication to his enlisted men, his lack of interest in my family's wealth and status, was reframed as proof that he was beneath me socially and intellectually. "A man who truly loved you would want what's best for your future," she said during what would be our final conversation before the wedding. "He'd understand that some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." The greater good. My happiness was being sacrificed for my father's political career and social standing, and they expected me to be grateful for the lesson.
The breaking point came during a routine mission briefing 3 weeks before my wedding. I was presenting intelligence assessments to SEAL Team 7 when I noticed something I'd never seen before. The way my teammates looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't the usual professional respect I was accustomed to, but something deeper, more protective. After the briefing, Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Tank Thompson approached me with an expression I'd never seen on the face of the toughest man I knew. Tank was a 20-year veteran who'd served in every major conflict since Desert Storm. A man who'd earned his nickname by literally stopping a moving vehicle with his bare hands during a hostage rescue in Somalia. "Lieutenant, can I speak with you privately?" he asked, his usual commanding presence tempered with unusual gentleness. In his office, Tank closed the door and sat across from me with the careful deliberation of someone choosing his words precisely. "Ma'am, the boys and I have been watching what's happening with your family situation. We know about your father refusing to attend the wedding." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Senior Chief, that's a personal matter." "With respect, Lieutenant, it stopped being personal when it started affecting one of our own," Tank interrupted. "We've been listening to your phone calls with your mother, watching you try to hold it together while they tear you down. These walls aren't as thick as you think, and we protect our family." The word family hit me like a revelation. These men, these warriors who'd shed blood in foreign countries and risked everything for each other, considered me family in a way my biological father never had. "Your father's been making calls," Tank continued, his voice hardening with controlled anger. "Political calls, trying to get information about Jake's background, his family's immigration status, looking for ammunition to use against him." The blood drained from my face. "What kind of calls?" "The kind that make us very unhappy," Tank said quietly. "Senator McKenzie contacted Immigration and Customs Enforcement asking for routine background verification on Jake's parents. He's also reached out to the Bureau of Personnel trying to access Jake's military records for security clearance purposes." I felt sick. My father wasn't just rejecting my marriage, he was actively investigating Jake, looking for ways to destroy him or his family. The man who gave speeches about supporting our troops was using his political power to attack one of the finest sailors I'd ever known. "There's more," Tank said, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed before. "Your father's chief of staff contacted our commanding officer, suggesting that your emotional instability might compromise your effectiveness in intelligence work. He's questioning your security clearance." The betrayal was staggering. My father was trying to destroy not just my relationship, but my military career, the thing I'd worked hardest to build independent of his influence. "Sir, what are you telling me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm telling you that your biological family is at war with your chosen family, and we don't abandon our own. Jake is one of the finest men I have ever served with, and you're one of the best intelligence officers in the Navy. Your father's trying to destroy both of you because his pride matters more to him than your happiness." Tank leaned forward, his expression intense. "Lieutenant, I've been in the Navy for 20 years. I've seen a lot of families, a lot of relationships, a lot of people who claim to love each other. What I've learned is that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands with you when the world goes to hell." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if your father won't walk you down that aisle, it's his loss. But you're not walking alone. You've got 100 brothers who would be honored to stand with you, and we're not about to let politics and social status destroy the happiness of two people who've earned our respect the hard way." The awakening was sudden and complete. I'd been fighting to maintain a relationship with people who valued their reputation more than my well-being, while ignoring the family who'd been supporting me unconditionally for years. Tank's revelation about my father's political attacks against Jake had transformed my heartbreak into something far more powerful: strategic determination. Within 24 hours of our conversation, I found myself in the most unusual mission planning session of my military career, surrounded by Navy SEALs who were treating my wedding like a high-stakes operation. "Gentlemen," Tank announced to the assembled team leaders in the secure briefing room normally reserved for classified operations, "we have a mission. One of our own is under political attack, and we're going to respond with overwhelming force. Military precision,
maximum visibility, and absolute class. Master Chief Petty Officer Diana Razor Santos, one of the few female SEALs and my closest mentor in the community, had flown in from Virginia Beach specifically for this planning session. She'd heard about my father's rejection through the tight network of special operations personnel and wasn't about to let it stand unchallenged. "Sarah," Razor said, spreading naval protocol manuals across the conference table, "your father thinks he can humiliate you by refusing to participate in your wedding. He's counting on you feeling isolated and abandoned. We're going to show him what real family support looks like." The plan they developed was audacious in its scope and devastating in its implications. If my father wouldn't walk me down the aisle, then 100 of America's most elite warriors would form the most spectacular honor guard in military wedding history. "We're talking about SEALs from every team on both coasts," Tank explained, pulling up a roster that read like a who's who of special operations legends. Active duty, recently retired, some guys will fly in from overseas assignments specifically for this. Lieutenant Commander James Hawk Morrison, Jake's former team leader, and a man who'd earned 3 Navy Crosses in Afghanistan, had volunteered to coordinate the logistics. "We'll execute this like a state funeral for a head of state," he said, with military precision. "Dress whites, ceremonial swords, precision formations that will be visible from satellites." But the strategy went beyond just impressive visuals. Master Chief Santos had contacted her friends in military public affairs, ensuring that news of the honor guard would reach every major media outlet in the country. A senator who'd built his career on military support, refusing to attend his Navy daughter's wedding while 100 Navy SEALs volunteered to escort her down the aisle, would make headlines worldwide. "Your father's rejection is going to backfire spectacularly," Tank said with satisfaction. "He wanted to isolate you, make you feel abandoned and ashamed. Instead, he's going to watch his daughter be honored by America's finest while the whole world sees what real support looks like." The irony was perfect. My father, who'd spent his political career claiming to champion military families, was about to be publicly contrasted with actual military families who protected their own regardless of social status or political calculation. "This isn't just about your wedding anymore," Razor concluded. "This is about showing every military family that we take care of our own, and anyone who attacks one of us answers to all of us."
The morning of May 28th dawned crystal clear over San Diego Bay, with perfect conditions for what would become the most legendary military wedding in naval history. By 0800 hours, Navy SEALs from across the country had assembled at Naval Base Coronado, their dress white uniforms immaculate and their ceremonial swords gleaming in the California sunshine. I stood in the bridal suite at the Hotel del Coronado, watching through the window as the honor guard formation took shape on the chapel grounds below. 100 of America's most elite warriors were arranging themselves in precise ranks, their movements coordinated with the same precision they brought to combat operations in hostile territory. "Sarah, you need to see this," Razor said, handing me her phone with a news alert that made my heart race. "CNN is calling it the wedding that honors military family values. Fox News has a helicopter covering the formation from above. This is going international." The media response had exceeded even our most optimistic projections. When word leaked that 100 Navy SEALs were forming an honor guard for a bride whose senator father had refused to attend, news outlets around the world had scrambled to cover the story. The contrast was too perfect to ignore. A politician who championed military families publicly rejecting his own military daughter, while actual warriors stepped in to provide the support he'd denied. At 13:30 hours, 30 minutes before the ceremony, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Sarah, your father is watching the news coverage." My mother's voice was strained and desperate. "He didn't realize this would become so public. He wants to know if it's too late for him to attend." The audacity was breathtaking. My father, seeing the negative publicity his rejection was generating, wanted to show up at the last minute to control the narrative and claim credit for supporting military families. "Mom, tell him it's too late," I said, my voice steady with newfound confidence. "He made his choice 3 weeks ago when he sent back my invitation with 'declined' written across it. These men made their choice when they volunteered to stand with me. I know which choice shows real character." Through the bridal suite window, I could see the news helicopters circling overhead, capturing footage of the most impressive honor guard formation in recent military history. Tank had positioned the SEALs in a ceremonial corridor leading from the chapel entrance to the altar, creating a pathway of drawn swords that would be visible in every photograph and video of the ceremony. At 1400 hours exactly, the chapel bells began to toll, and I made my way to the entrance where Tank was waiting in his dress whites, his chest adorned with ribbons representing 2 decades of service in the world's most dangerous places. "Ready, Lieutenant?" he asked, offering his arm with the same confidence he'd shown leading men into combat. "Ready, Senior Chief," I replied, feeling more supported and honored than I ever felt in my life. As we approached the chapel doors, I could see the formation stretching before us, 100 Navy SEALs standing at attention in perfect ranks, their ceremonial swords raised in salute, creating a tunnel of steel and honor that led to Jake waiting at the altar in his dress blues. The news cameras captured every step as Tank escorted me down the aisle between warriors who'd earned their place through courage and sacrifice rather than birthright and political connections. Each SEAL I passed represented values my father claimed to support but had never actually lived: loyalty, honor, and commitment to something greater than personal ambition. Jake stood at the altar with tears in his eyes, not because he was emotional about our wedding, but because he was witnessing his brothers honoring the woman he loved in a way her own family had refused to do. The ceremony was broadcast live across multiple networks, watched by millions of people who saw what real military family support looked like when it wasn't filtered through political calculation and social prejudice. My father had rejected me to protect his reputation. Instead, he'd created the most public demonstration possible of his own hypocrisy, while elevating me to a platform I never could have achieved on my own.
The political fallout from my wedding was swift and devastating for my father's carefully constructed image. By Monday morning, Senator William McKenzie's office was drowning in phone calls from constituents demanding explanations for why he'd refused to attend his Navy daughter's wedding, while 100 Navy SEALs had volunteered to honor her instead. The images from the ceremony had gone viral worldwide. The tunnel of raised swords, Tank's proud expression as he walked me down the aisle, the formation of America's most elite warriors standing in perfect precision, while my father was notably absent. Every news outlet in the country was running the story with headlines that destroyed his political narrative. "Senator who champions military families snubs own Navy daughter's wedding," read The Washington Post. "Navy SEALs step in where father won't," declared USA Today. The most damaging was from Military Times. "When politicians talk and warriors walk, the wedding that exposed false patriotism." My father's Senate office issued a statement claiming he'd been unable to attend due to urgent defense appropriations business, but the excuse crumbled immediately when reporters verified that Congress had been in recess that weekend. His attempts to cover up his rejection with lies only made the story bigger and more damaging. The veterans organizations that had supported his campaigns for 20 years began withdrawing their endorsements. The Military Family Coalition, which had given him their Champion of Armed Forces Families Award 3 years running, publicly revoked the honor and issued a statement calling his actions antithetical to the values we hold sacred. But the most devastating reversal came from his own political party. Senator Patricia Mills, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee and my father's longtime ally, held a press conference that destroyed his remaining credibility on military issues. "I've known William McKenzie for 15 years, Senator Mills said, standing before a podium flanked by flags and military service emblems. "I've heard him give countless speeches about supporting our troops and their families.
But when his own daughter, a decorated naval officer, needed his support, he chose his social prejudices over his paternal duty. This isn't the leadership our military families deserve. The clip played on every major news network for weeks, with political analysts using my father's rejection as a case study in how personal hypocrisy could destroy a political career built on military support. My father's attempts at damage control only made things worse. He agreed to an interview with CNN where he tried to explain his position, but every answer revealed more about his character than he intended. "I support all military families," he insisted, his voice defensive. "But parents have a responsibility to guide their children toward appropriate choices that will serve their long-term interests." "Senator," the interviewer pressed, "your daughter is a Naval Academy graduate and decorated intelligence officer marrying a Bronze Star recipient. How is that inappropriate?" "Social compatibility matters in marriage," my father replied, apparently unaware of how elitist he sounded. "Different backgrounds can create challenges that young people don't always anticipate." The interview became a social media phenomenon, with veterans posting responses that contrasted my father's words with the values actually demonstrated by military families. #RealMilitaryValues began trending, with thousands of service members sharing stories of how the military community supported them regardless of background or social status. Meanwhile, Jake and I were experiencing the opposite effect. Letters poured in from military families around the world thanking us for showing what authentic support looked like. Speaking requests came from veterans organizations, military academies, and leadership conferences wanting us to share our story. The Department of the Navy issued an unprecedented statement praising the SEAL Honor Guard as an example of the brotherhood and commitment that makes our Special Operations Forces the finest in the world. Secretary of Defense Austin personally called to congratulate us and invite us to a Pentagon reception honoring military families. My father had intended his rejection to isolate me and force me to choose his approval over my happiness. Instead, he'd elevated me to a platform where I could advocate for military families while destroying his own reputation as their champion. The man who'd built his career on false patriotism was being exposed by the authentic patriotism of warriors who'd actually earned the right to speak about service, sacrifice, and family values.
3 years after my wedding, I stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, watching President Biden sign the Military Family Support Act, legislation I'd helped draft that expanded benefits and recognition for military families, regardless of their background or social status. The law had been inspired directly by the response to my wedding story and the national conversation it had sparked about authentic versus performative patriotism. The ceremony was attended by military family advocates from across the country, including many of the Navy SEALs who'd formed my honor guard. Tank stood in the front row wearing his dress blues, now retired from active duty, but serving as National Director of the Military Family Foundation we'd established together. This legislation ensures that all military families receive the support they've earned through service, not the support they can afford through social connections, President Biden said during his remarks, looking directly at me as he spoke. It was inspired by a naval officer who showed us that real family values aren't about who you're born to, but who stands with you when it matters most. The foundation had become one of the most influential military advocacy organizations in the country, funded by donations from corporations, veteran organizations, and individuals who'd been moved by our story. We'd helped hundreds of military families navigate challenges ranging from deployment support to educational assistance, always focusing on merit and need rather than political connections. Jake had been promoted to Senior Chief Petty Officer and was now serving as an instructor at the Navy's Special Warfare Training Center, teaching the next generation of SEALs about leadership, brotherhood, and the values that had created our honor guard. His humility and competence had earned him respect throughout the special operations community, proving that character mattered more than pedigree. The book I'd written about military families and authentic patriotism, When Warriors Walk, Lessons in Real Family Values, had become required reading at all service academies and was used in leadership courses throughout the military. The proceeds funded scholarships for children of enlisted service members, ensuring that the next generation had opportunities regardless of their family's financial status. Speaking engagements took me around the world, sharing our story with military audiences, corporate leadership conferences, and university graduations. The message was always the same. Real strength comes from lifting others up, not from protecting artificial hierarchies based on birth or wealth. Our daughter Emma was now 2 years old and already showing signs of the confidence that comes from being raised in a family built on genuine values rather than social expectations. She'd grown up surrounded by the SEAL uncles who'd formed my honor guard, learning from an early age that family was defined by loyalty and character rather than blood or status. The most satisfying triumph wasn't political or professional. It was personal. The military community that had embraced us after my father's rejection had become our true family in every meaningful way. Holiday gatherings were spent with fellow service members. Birthday parties included children whose parents wore uniforms rather than designer clothes. And our support system was built on shared sacrifice rather than shared privilege. My father had lost his Senate seat in the next election, his military support coalition destroyed by the hypocrisy exposed through his rejection of my wedding. He'd attempted to reconcile several times, sending letters through my mother that blamed his actions on stress and political pressure, rather than taking responsibility for choosing his reputation over my daughter's happiness. But the relationship couldn't be rebuilt on apologies that didn't acknowledge the fundamental values difference between us. He'd shown me that his love was conditional on my compliance with his vision for my life, while my military family had demonstrated unconditional support based on mutual respect and shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. The woman my father had tried to shame into abandoning her chosen family had instead become a voice for military families nationwide, while the warriors he dismissed as beneath our social status had become American heroes whose story inspired millions of people around the world. Sometimes the people who reject you give you exactly what you need to find where you truly belong.
Standing in Emma's nursery 5 years later, looking at the framed photograph from my wedding day that showed the tunnel of raised swords and Tank's proud smile as he walked me down the aisle, I finally understood the gift my father had unknowingly given me. His rejection had forced me to discover what real family looked like, and the contrast had changed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of military families around the world. Emma, now a confident 5-year-old with Jake's warm eyes and my stubborn determination, discovered me studying the photograph one evening as I prepared for a speech at the Naval War College about leadership and authentic values. "Mommy, why didn't Grandpa William come to your wedding?" she asked, with the innocent directness that cut straight to the heart of complex issues. I'd rehearsed this conversation many times, knowing that eventually I'd need to explain why she had a grandfather she never met, why certain family photos had been carefully edited, why Uncle Tank and the other SEALs were more present in her life than her biological grandfather. Sometimes, sweetheart, people care more about what other people think than about the people they're supposed to love, I said, kneeling to her level while she played with her military action figures. Gifts from her SEAL uncles who taught her that heroes come in all backgrounds. Grandpa William was worried that Daddy wasn't important enough for our family, but he was wrong about what makes someone important. "That's silly," Emma declared with the clear moral judgment that adults often complicate. "Daddy saves people." "Yes, he does. And the people who really love you celebrate that, not worry about whether it's impressive enough for their friends." What my father's rejection had taught me was the difference between conditional and unconditional love, between family and tribe, between reputation and character. True family, I'd learned, wasn't determined by blood relations or social connections. Family was built on shared values, mutual support, and genuine care. Qualities my father had never actually possessed, despite our biological connection. The wisdom I'd gained from his betrayal extended far beyond personal relationships. Through the Military Family Foundation and our advocacy work, I'd seen how artificial hierarchies and social prejudices damaged entire communities. Military families were judged by rank, background, and education, rather than service and sacrifice. Children of enlisted personnel face different opportunities than children of officers, not because of ability, but because of social assumptions. One of the most important lessons I've learned, I told audiences at leadership conferences, is that real strength comes from lifting others up, not from protecting artificial barriers that keep people separated by circumstances of birth rather than merit of character. This perspective had transformed how we approached military family support. Instead of replicating civilian social structures within the military community, we work to create systems based on service and need rather than rank and connection. We provided equal opportunities regardless of background, celebrated achievement based on effort rather than pedigree. The foundation had helped thousands of military families, but perhaps more importantly, it had changed the conversation about what authentic patriotism looked like. Supporting the troops meant supporting all troops and their families, not just the ones who fit comfortable social categories. My father had tried to shame me into abandoning Jake and the military community because they didn't meet his standards of social acceptability. Instead, his rejection had elevated both of us to a platform where we could advocate for military families while demonstrating that real character transcends social prejudice. The ultimate irony was how completely his strategy had backfired. He had intended his absence to diminish my wedding and force me to choose his approval over my happiness. Instead, he'd created the most spectacular military wedding in recent history while destroying his own reputation as a supporter of military families. Most importantly, his rejection had taught me that sometimes the people who refuse to love you unconditionally are doing you the greatest favor possible. They're showing you who deserves your energy and loyalty and freeing you to find the family that will support your authentic self, rather than demanding you become someone else to earn their approval. Standing in Emma's room, surrounded by photos of the military family that had embraced us after my father's rejection, I felt profound gratitude for a lesson I never expected to learn. Sometimes, the most devastating betrayals become the most liberating gifts because they force you to discover strength you didn't know you possessed and families you didn't know you deserved.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.